I'm glad you're here today. I want to say welcome to everybody here in Oklahoma City and also in Clovis, New Mexico at Servant's Heart Chapel. Darrell and Melissa Underwood pastor out there, and we're just honored to be on the team with them, and it's exciting to see what God's doing in other places, not just here, but in other places around the country. And they're joining in with us on the 40-day prayer and fasting campaign, and Zanesville, Ohio, and Cary Street Fellowship. They're joining in together too, and so just exciting to see God's working, not just here, but there's a lot of people praying and seeking God's face. Did you know that in this 40-day prayer and fasting campaign that we're doing right now, there's 50 people that I text the verses to every day, and that's not counting anybody in Clovis or Zanesville. So there's 50 people. If everybody prayed 5 minutes or 10 minutes and sought the Lord and just really prayed and asked God to do the things that we're praying together about, you know that we're praying for three things specifically. We said, Lord, raise up a generation of men in Oklahoma City that have a heart for God, have a hunger for God. We're praying, secondly, that God would give us as a church holiness of heart and life, that we would be exemplary and that our hearts would be purified by faith, like Acts 15 talks about. And then additionally, we're praying that God would reveal and show the power of the Holy Spirit in our church, that we would have the power and the boldness of the Holy Spirit, that God would regularly do things that we can't explain by my preaching or your talent or your serving or our singing or that God would do things that aren't explainable any other way except that God's here and God's working. And those are the three things we're asking for in this 40 days. Do you know that if everybody I text spends 10 minutes praying over those things every day and just seeking God, do you know that's 500 minutes of prayer just in our church? That's hours every day of people going to God and asking Him. There's power when the church prays together. And so I just want to encourage you to keep that up. I had somebody this morning that told me as I was coming in, he said, you know what, I just forgot to choose anything about the fasting thing. And I had somebody else tell me on the way in this morning that, man, I fell off the bandwagon with my fasting this week. And let me tell you, today is Grace Day. All right, today's Grace Day. Just jump in with us, all right? Just jump in with us. We're in day 15, or I think it's 15 now, and if it's something like that, anyway. It's 14. Okay, well, thank you. You know what? You're right. I accidentally put the wrong number on it. Whatever day it is, that's where we're at. And so I just want to encourage you, jump in with us and be a part of it for the rest of the time. And we are just excited to see what God's going to do. I believe that we're going to see answers to prayer in the coming days. Yeah, Mike, you have a question? Absolutely. You know what? You weren't here the Sunday where everybody signed up, and that's how it didn't happen. So don't let me forget, will you? Maybe shoot me a text so I'll have something to anchor to after I'm done preaching here, because everything else has to leave my brain when I preach. So I don't remember anything. I don't even remember my own name when I get done. So, all right. I'm joking. Everybody's like, wait, what? Yeah. I want to talk to you today a message on fasting and praying. All right? I want to talk to you about how to keep the body from winning over the heart. I want to talk to you about how to keep the body from winning over the heart. Let me tell you what I mean by that. How many of people have ever decided you were going to do something? You know what? I know this isn't good for me. I'm going to cut out, I don't know, dessert or something like that. How many of you have ever done something like that in your life? How many of you it lasted like 3 days, and then it went on, yeah. It's like John Maxwell talks about goals, and he said in January you can't find a parking spot in front of the health club. You can't find a parking spot. He said February you can't find a parking spot in front of Krispy Kreme donuts. Because everybody, you can have your pick of the parking spots in front of the health club, but people we tend to drift, don't we? We just tend to drift and lose focus. And how do we keep the body from winning over the heart. We want to do something, we want to accomplish something, but how do we keep that the body from winning in its desires and drives? Maybe you've felt sometime like you wanted to do something, but just the bodily drives and desires were hard to overcome. Things like diet versus eating. Getting up versus sleeping. Anybody had that one this week? I had that one this morning. My alarm clock said get up, and the rest of me said no. Obedience versus sin. Purity versus immorality. Clean mind versus lust. Drugs versus being clean. Alcohol versus sobriety. There's 100 ways this could express itself, right? There's an old song in the 70s disco era that Karen Carpenter sang, "My body keeps changing my mind, changing my heart." How do you keep that from being your reality? Because obviously if somebody sang it, a lot of people know what that's about and how that happens. How do we keep that from being a reality in our life, all right? Here's the bottom line then, okay? The bottom line is this. If you allow fleshly hunger to dominate your life, it will crowd out and kill spiritual hunger. If you allow fleshly hunger to dominate your life, it will crowd out and kill spiritual hunger. You see, when you get used to yielding in a particular area, it gets easier to give up. It gets easier to give up. Did you know the way your brain works, that it's connected, all the brain cells are connected with the neurons are connected over something called synapses. Synapses is a little joint between the neurons where electrical impulse of a thought travels along, and then it jumps across that synapse and travels on down through the next neurons. Over time, when a thought travels that way a lot, that synapse gets stronger because your brain recognizes you think this way a lot and strengthens that connection. It strengthens that connection because your brain is wired to make itself more and more efficient when you use it in a particular way. So it takes less energy for you to think. This is why you don't have to think about picking up a spoon and okay, now let's see. You ever seen a baby try to pick up a spoon for the first time and they're trying to feed themselves and they're missing their mouth and they're dropping the food off of it. You don't have to think about it anymore, do you? Because your brain has gotten very efficient at doing that, so you don't have any conscious effort at all in feeding yourself. Lots of other things like that. Your brain automates things. Now, this can work to your benefit, or it can really hurt you. Because when your brain starts to automate things that are fleshly hungers, and you automate going the wrong direction, then you do it without thinking. And you don't process it, and you just automate. It becomes easier and easier to go that way, and harder to go the other way. The good news is that your brain can rewire itself. It is possible for you to conquer, to win, and to change the portion of control that the body has over the heart. It is possible for you to do that. You can be rewired. That's why Romans, almost said 1 Corinthians, Romans chapter 12, verse 2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." You can literally think differently than you did before. So if you don't want fleshly hunger to dominate and crowd out your spiritual life and kill your spiritual hunger, what are you supposed to do? Okay, first of all, I got to tell you this before I really get into the content this morning. I got to tell you that I'm not down on the body. Okay? I'm not like somehow as if sin lives in your physical body and, well, you got a physical body, I guess you'll never be free from sin as long as you're in this body. No. That's not the truth. That's not the truth. The sin doesn't live in your physical self at all. The truth is, sin lives in the choice of your will and in the direction, the bent of your heart. And so the good news is we don't believe that the body is evil. We don't believe that the body is evil. We know that is not true. In fact, in the Scripture, there are two words that are used when talking about the body, or the two words that sometimes are used interchangeably, but usually they mean one particular set of things. One is the word sarkos in Greek. It's usually translated flesh. Everybody say flesh. It's usually translated flesh or fleshly. The word sarkos means that the sin nature. In fact, sometimes in the NIV translation, which a lot of times I use on Sunday mornings, it will take the word flesh and translate sarkos and translate it sinful nature, because it wants to avoid the challenge of you thinking of, that's what it means. It means sinful nature, and it doesn't want you to think about it as like your body is your enemy. It's it's fighting against you somehow. The flesh is from the fall. It goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. That's where it comes from. It's sometimes called the sinful nature. The body, the other word is soma. Everybody say soma. Now you've spoken Greek this morning, all right? You're a Greek speaker, all right? The body, soma, is from creation. It's what God made. It's this part of you right here that you can strengthen and you can work out. It's that part of you. It's the part that you put the food in. Right? That's soma. It's from creation. Flesh is the sinful nature. The body, soma, is the physical body. The flesh is dangerous. The body is neutral. It's neutral. You can use it for good or you can use it for evil, right? The flesh, sarkos, wants to be mastered, wants to be master, wants to be in charge. The body just wants to be pampered. It just wants you to take care of it, right? And so you do have to discipline your body, but your body's not your enemy. The flesh wants to be, we are commanded to starve it. The body, we're commanded to take care of it. The flesh, we are commanded to hate it. The body, we should just be suspicious of it. You should be suspicious of it. The flesh, sarkos, must be put to death. He says we must put to death the deeds, the fleshly misdeeds of the body. Put to death the sarkos. The body must just be controlled. The flesh says you have to kill it. The body, soma, you have to discipline. Okay, so those are two different things about. I'm glad, by the way, that this body is not my enemy. Right. It's not my enemy. I don't have to look in the mirror and hate it and wish that I didn't have it. I've had guys talk to me and say, let me just make this real to you. I've had guys talk to me and say, young men who are coming up and they're not married and they're struggling with the temptation to immorality and sexual misconduct. And they say to me, I just wish this drive, this desire wasn't so strong. It's like God, you know what? The drives that God put within you, He put there for a reason. And the reason He did it was to drive you toward responsibility in marriage. Right? That's why they're there, is because God said, these young men are never going to become responsible if I don't drive them toward marriage and toward taking care of a woman. They're going to sit around playing video games and looking after themselves, and I want to drive them toward responsibility. So He gave you a strong drive and desire in the body. Now, it does have to be controlled, but it's not your enemy. It's not your enemy. God put that part of you there. It's not your enemy. The sarkos, the flesh, wants to twist it and use it for your spiritual detriment, wants to make you sin. And that's your enemy. That's your enemy. Does that make sense? Everybody say, nod your head if that makes sense. All right, here we go. Let's go on to how to keep from being controlled by fleshly desires. Number one, discipline your body. Okay, discipline your body. 1 Corinthians 9, verses 26 and 27. Therefore, I do not run like a man running aimlessly. I do not fight like a man beating the air. You ever seen somebody shadow box? Right? No, it's just shadow boxing. There's nobody there. They're just shadow boxing. He said, I'm not fighting like somebody beating the air. He's saying, I'm fighting intentionally. Verse 27, no, I beat my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified from the prize. What's Paul saying? He's saying, I know that if I'm going to be intentional about running this race, I've got to discipline myself bodily to make sure that my body isn't letting me down and that it's not just wanting to be pampered all the time. I'm going to have to beat it up a little bit and fight through it so it can serve the higher good. I'm not trying to kill my body. I'm not trying to get rid of my body. I'm disciplining it so it serves the highest good in my life. The body is a good servant, but a terrible master. It is. It's a good servant. Like, it does good work for you, but it's a terrible master. If you are mastered by your body, by just fleshly desires, and by that I mean just the drives and desires that you have for food or for sex or for other things, for pleasures of some kind, if you're mastered by that, then it doesn't end well. It never ends well. The body's a good servant, but a terrible master. So how do we discipline our body? Here's ways to discipline your body. Number one, go crazy on fighting your weak areas. Go crazy on fighting your weak areas. Matthew 18:8, Jesus gave this really powerful principle. Matthew 18, verse 8. If your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. Wait, what? What? That doesn't make any sense at all, does it? That makes no sense unless Jesus is just saying, you got to go crazy on this thing. There's nothing to... In fact, the word in Greek here, when he said your hand, it's your good hand, your best hand. Like my right hand. For me, I'm a right-hander. I can't do anything left-handed. I'm horrible with my left hand. I can't drive a nail with my left hand. He's saying, your good hand. Whatever it takes, even if it costs you way more than you thought, cut off that which is causing you to be weak in an area. Now, there's some people who have taken this really extremely literally. They're in Christian history. There have been some Christians who, well-meaning, in the Middle Ages, there were monks who would, when they felt temptation, say sexual temptation or something like that, they would burn their finger in candles, and there were monks who literally burned all their fingers off. They just gradually over time they burn. And that's okay. I'm not saying you have to do that and you have to beat yourself with a whip or something like that. Here's what I am saying: is there any price that's too large to pay for you to win over sin? Jesus is saying, is there any price too high for you to pay? The truth is, you have weak areas. You have areas in which you're vulnerable to temptation and sin. I know that's shocking, and you probably didn't know that. But it's true. You have weak areas. I have weak areas. What are you going to do about those? Jesus is making this point in a shocking and memorable sort of way. Because he says in the last half of verse number 8, it would be better for you to enter life maimed or crippled than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into eternal fire. Now, I don't think that I want you to go home and burn your finger in a candle until you burn all your fingers off like those misguided monks. But I will tell you this: if they went to heaven and you made fun of them because of their commitment and you went to hell, you would be the loser. That's what Jesus is saying. You're an idiot if you think 2 good hands down here is the way to go, but I'm just going to be weak and go to hell someday. You would be the loser. You'd be the fool. You got to go crazy on disciplining, fighting your weak areas. It is better to hurt the body than to lose the soul. The body is not of ultimate value. The soul, who you are, the animating life force of your life, is worth more than just this body. But you know what we tend to do? we tend to elevate the body until it is the thing that we take care of most and ignore the soul. If it's soul versus body in any area of your life, you got to make sure soul wins. Your heart wins. If something is continually causing you to sin, some area of your life or your body that is weak and soft and you can't discipline yourself easily, get rid of the possibility. There is a particular area of my life I've talked to you a little bit about before where the eyes are very powerful for me. I am very visual. I'm an extremely visual person. I love illustrations and art and things like that. I'm a very visual person, and eyes are extremely powerful for me. There are some movies I can't watch. By the way, I don't think you probably can either for a lot of them. We're a very visual culture, actually. And there are some movies I can't watch because it's too big of a temptation for me. There are some websites I can't go to that are blocked on my internet filter because they're just too big of a temptation for me. There's a legitimate news site that I don't go to. I have it blocked on my blocker, and I can't go to it. Anytime I'm connected to this home network from my phone or I can't go to it. And the reason I blocked it is not because it's illegitimate, it's because I love to read news, and when I go and click through and then I wind up on this site and that site, and then over here on the sidebar, there's a series of pictures over here of paparazzi pictures of movie stars and where they're vacationing in the Cayman Islands this week. And I don't need that in my life. I don't, because I'm not that strong. You got to know your weak areas. And so I just said, fine, let's block it. Let's cut it off, because I don't need that in my life. Disciplining your body. Teddy Roosevelt's dad, Teddy Roosevelt, the U.S. president, was known in his presidential years for being just a strong, virile, outdoorsy man's man. But when he was growing up, he was highly intelligent but not very strong. He was kind of weak and sick a lot when he was growing up. And one day his father said to him, "Teddy, you have the mind, but you have not the body. So you must make the body. You have the mind already, but you're going to have to make the body." And Teddy Roosevelt took that very, very seriously, and he became a strong, outdoorsy, gutsy man's man, because he decided he was going to build the body. So, what are you going to do to look and see and fight? What are your weak areas? Do you know what they are? Have you identified those? Where are areas that you are prone to just giving up and slipping and letting it down? What are areas in which the body's drives tend to dominate what you do, and it's almost like you can't stop yourself? Can I go one more step with you? Here we go. Back a while back, it's been months ago, I had this thing where I would do where I would be working, and anybody know the 2:30 feeling, like that, like 2:30, like in the afternoon, you're like, whew, okay. Like you're starting to slow down for the day, and the lunch is digesting, and you're feeling like a nap should be in order. You know, it's like that feeling. And I'd be going, and I'd like, you know what, I got to push myself through. I got to be productive for the rest of this day. I got to get something done off my list. And I would swing through a drive-through, and I would pick up a Dr. Pepper, easy ice, because they give you so much ice, you know, and it's like there's not enough Dr. Pepper there, and so less ice equals more product. And you know what, that caffeine and that sugar, I'd do well for the next couple of hours. I really would. I'd be like, whoo, let's go, yeah. And then I started needing it. Like I started needing that, and I started feeling that feeling where it's like I got to have my Dr. Pepper. And I don't like that. I don't like that feeling. It's what Paul said. I don't have this on your handout, but Paul said, the Apostle Paul said, "I will not be brought under the power of anything." And I felt like I'm getting under the power of this. Like I need it. Now I'm not criticizing pop. Okay, it's probably bad for you. I haven't drunk any in a good while. I stopped. I decided strategically I'm not going to go through the drive-thru. I'm just not going to do it. And several times I'd be driving down the road and I'd say out loud to myself, I'm not going to do it. Nope, not going to do it. I'm just, it's 99 cents, it's $1.08, but I'm not going to do it. Because I wanted to beat up on that area of me so that my body didn't become master of the choices that I make, even in small areas. That's not sin. I mean, it could be. If God told you don't drink it, it could be a sin. But it's not like the Bible says, thou shalt not drink pop, okay? It doesn't say that. But for me, I was like, this is an area I don't want to be dominated. I don't want to be conquered. I wish I had the time to go into you with all the research in this area. There's a book called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. There's another book that's called The Willpower Instinct by Kelly McGonigal. And these really fascinating studies being done on why we have willpower and what we do with it. But I can't go into it now. You'll have to read them on your own. All right? Fasting is the second thing. All right? Fasting is the second way to discipline your body. This is why we're fasting together right now. Okay? And by the way, fasting is denying yourself something bodily so that you can focus spiritually. That's what fasting is. You're denying yourself something for the sake of focusing your attention toward the Lord. And so, I don't know what it is. Some people have told me they were fasting pop. Some people said they were going to fast a meal. Some people said they were going to fast TV or DVD or videos or something like that. And some people said they were going to fast a particular type of food, like they were only going to eat this kind of meat or not anything else. And just different. Here's what I'm saying. It can be very individual. It can be, but what is it for you? What is it for you when you say, I'm going to deny myself so that I gain mastery over the drives and desires of my body, so that I am the master of my taste buds, so that I am the master of what I do, so I am in control. The fruit of the Spirit, after all, is self-control, right? One of the fruits of the Spirit. Fasting. Joel 2:12 and verses following. Even now, declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting and weeping and mourning. Rend your hearts and not your garments. Return to the Lord, for he is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love, and he relents from sending calamity. Who knows, he may turn and have pity and leave behind a blessing, grain offerings and drink offerings for the Lord your God. Fasting, by the way, is not just a way to get things from God. If you're taking notes, it's a way to help your heart hunger return to God. Because here's the thing. If your heart hunger and the things you rejoice in this world are all things related to something on a screen or in a wallet or in your driveway or on a wall in your house, or if that's where all the rejoicing and the joy in your life comes from, there's a problem somewhere. There's a problem somewhere. If that's the only joy, if there's no joy in the Lord, but there's joy in other things, in that person or that relationship, if that's the only sources of joy in your life, there's a problem. You need to recenter and get Jesus back in the center of your joy in your life. It's a way, fasting is not a way to get things from God, like somehow I'm going to get God's arm up behind his back and say, aha, now I've got you, I'm fasting, now you have to answer me. No, it's that my heart turns itself back toward a hunger for him. Taste and see that the Lord is good, right? The more you destroy and deny fleshly hunger, the more spiritual hunger increases. When you deny and destroy fleshly hunger, sinful hungers, the more spiritual hunger is able to grow in your life. You never know. You never know what the phrase, taste and see that the Lord is good, means until you have fasted and then seen God answer prayer. Oh, and then you're like, oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Matthew 6:16, Jesus said this, when you fast, do not look somber like the hypocrites do. I'm fasting. Oh, yes, I'm fasting. Don't look somber like the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show men that they are fasting. I tell you the truth, they've already received their reward in full. That's what they wanted out of their fasting time, that people would notice they were fasting, and they got it. What do you want out of your fasting time? Jesus said, when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face. He said, hey, clean your face up, smile, comb your hair. Don't make it a public thing and somehow you got to brag about it. Oh, I'm a very spiritual person. I fast often and make sure I mention it on Facebook. Right? You don't have to tell everybody what you're doing and you don't have to. Yeah, but it will not, verse 18, it will not be obvious to men that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Yes. You hunger for God, you get more of Him. And when you get more of Him, you get more of what He can do, too. It comes along with it. In other words, don't use your spiritual fasting to feed fleshly, sinful desires, right? Oh, I'm going to look so good if I fast. No, that's not the point. Turn your heart toward the Lord. Number 2, ways to discipline your body. Number 2, put to death the flesh. The flesh. Now remember, by that I'm talking about the sarkos, the fleshly, sinful nature. Romans 8:8, those controlled by the sinful nature, that's that word flesh, sarkos, those controlled by the sinful nature cannot please God. That's really strong. That is really powerful. Cannot please God. It is impossible to please Him when you are under the control of the sarkos, the fleshly, sinful nature, that bent of the will, the bend of the heart that says, I want my way. I want my way more than I want anything else. You can't possibly please God while you're doing that. Romans 13, verse 14. I'm going to continue on Romans 8:8, all right? Romans 8:8, those controlled by the sinful nature cannot please God. You, however, are not controlled by the sinful nature, but by the Spirit, if the Spirit of God lives in you. Therefore, brothers, we have an obligation, but it is not to the sinful nature to live according to it. For if you live according to the sinful nature, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the misdeeds of the body, the sins of the body, you will live. It doesn't say put to death the body, soma. It says the misdeeds of the body. Where does that come from? The sarkos, the flesh, the sinful nature that says, I want to have my way. I want to be in charge and in control of my life first of all. Romans 13:14 gives us the alternative. He says, rather, clothe yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ, and do not even think about how to gratify the desires of the sinful nature. Anybody besides me have this thing in your brain that happens in the morning when your alarm goes off? I told my wife, it's like, I'm the best rationalizer in the world when my alarm goes off in the morning. It's like I set my alarm at night, I lay down, I go to sleep, and by the time this one wets the bed and that one wakes up in the middle of the night, and now, by the time my night is over and my alarm goes off, I'm like, oh, last night I was crazy when I set that alarm. I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't thinking clearly at all. In fact, actually, it's 6 o'clock or whatever. And what I meant to think was, the truth is, if I prayed while I got dressed, And maybe if I prayed while I got dressed and ate a granola bar, I could do 3 things at once and get done 3 times as fast, right? Because these things all make sense when it's dark and there's no, like the sun's not up yet and the alarm's going off and you're like, oh, my bed is calling my name. Those things make sense. Now I feel like now is when I'm really sane. Last night I was crazy, but now I'm really thinking clearly. I don't know what that is, but you know what? The truth is, if I think about it long enough and I don't move forward, if I don't go ahead and walk on into the bathroom and go ahead and brush my teeth and go ahead and get my hair started combing, if I don't go ahead and do all of those things, I will, if I sit there and think about it, I'll go back to bed. Because this is what he's talking about. Do not even think about how to gratify the desires, right? If you sit there and mull over, well, let's see, how could I? I know this isn't really right, but how could I do that? You will. Don't think about it. Don't give it space. Run. Run. This is why Paul says to Timothy in another place, flee from youthful desires which war against the soul. Flee against sinful desires. They fight against the soul. You got to run. Get out of there. No, don't stay. Don't stay near it. Don't stay by it. Don't leave a channel open for it. Go. Get out. Run. Put to death the flesh. Don't even think about how to provide. Don't provide for the sinful nature. If you're taking notes, don't provide for the sinful nature. Kill it. Starve it. Don't sit and think about it. Don't provide a time slot for it. Don't provide a weekend for it. Don't provide transportation for it. Don't provide money for it. Starve it. Starve it. Kill it. Colossians chapter 3, verse 5 says, put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature. Sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming. Okay? The judgment of God is going to come on these things. And so, if you know this to be true, kill them. Put them to death. Crucify them with Jesus on the cross. Nail them to the cross with Jesus. Now the question I would ask you is this: have you died to your fleshly desires? Have you died to them? Or are you very much alive to what your body desires and what your sinful nature desires? Are you very much alive to it? I have met so many people who almost make it a bragging point. Almost make it a bragging point how surrendered they are to their physical desires. It's almost like it's a point of pride for them. Oh no, I tell you what, You know people like that? It's almost like it's I tell you what, I eat, I'm starved, I'm hungry. I tell you what, I can't resist this, I can't resist that. It's almost like they're not trying to kill it, almost like they're bragging about it. Have you died to your fleshly desires? Let me tell you this, if you have not, kill them and ask Jesus for his help, because you're not going to be able to kill them by yourself. You're going to need the help of God to put to death the fleshly desires that war against your soul. I've told this story before, used this illustration before, but it bears repeating. In the book from C.S. Lewis wrote in the Chronicles of Narnia, there is a scene in the third book, the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. There's a young man named Eustace Scrubb. Eustace is a nasty, complaining, whiny, selfish young man. He gets on the boat, the Dawn Treader, not by his own choice. He's transported into Narnia, and he's sailing with King Caspian, off into the unknown, into the ocean in the land of Narnia. And while they're there, they discover an island, and they go ashore and spend a couple of days there to get supplies and gather food and water. And while he is there, he wanders off and finds a cave full of gold. And when he finds the cave full of gold, he goes in and he realizes he is rich beyond his wildest dreams. And he starts talking about it, or thinking about it, and rejoicing, and all those other Caspian and all the rest of those, they're not like me. They think they're rich, but look at me. I could keep all this for myself. I wonder if there's any way for me to get this back home. And he's thinking all of these selfish thoughts, and he lays down to take a rest and falls asleep. While he's there, as C.S. Lewis says, as he fell asleep thinking dragonish thoughts, he didn't realize he had fallen asleep in an enchanted cave. It was a dragon's cave. And when he awoke, he had changed into a dragon. He woke up and he realizes, as he looks and he sees a dragon's foot on each side, and he thinks, oh no, I'm right between the feet of a dragon. And he starts to move his hand, and this foot moves as well. He says, oh no. And then he tries to move his other hand and get up, and that one moves as well. And then he finally looks into a pool, a calm pool, and realizes he is the dragon. And he cries great hot dragon tears. And he realizes, oh no, I've become a dragon. What am I to do? And he can't help himself, and he can't change himself. And then early one morning, as he's just despairing about what he's going to do, early one morning, Aslan, the great lion, the type of Jesus in the Narnia stories, comes to him. And he says, follow me. And he goes and he follows him up into a place in the mountains where there's a big pool. And he says to Eustace, the dragon, he says, do you know that you could be undressed of your dragon clothes? And Eustace said later, when he is telling the story, he said, I realized snakes and lizards and reptiles shed their skin, and I could be rid of this. And he said, I started scratching. Oh, it felt so great that just all that old dragon scales and skins coming off. And he said, I did. And then he said, and then I looked, but I was still a dragon. And he said, I thought, well, I'll do it again. And he said, I did it again. And I scratched off another layer, and I looked, but I was still a dragon. Now, some of you have lived your life just kind of scraping a little bit here, scraping a little bit there. But you know what? That flesh is still alive. That selfish, me-first dragon nature is still there, and it's still calling the shots in your life. And Aslan the lion just sat and watched. But then he said to Eustace, would you like me to help? And Eustace said, yes, I would. And he said, the lion took his claws and sank them in. And he said, it felt as though it would go all the way to my heart. And he said, he began to pull in great chunks, and it hurt like everything. But he said, then he picked me up and threw me into the pool, and it stung like everything, and then it started to feel deliciously good. And he wasn't a dragon anymore. You know why I think C.S. Lewis wrote that? I think he had experienced what I'm talking about today. I think he had experienced the trying and trying and trying on your own to beat and become something different. Let's get rid of the old self. Let's scratch off a little more, another layer. But you look in the mirror and you know it's still you that's in charge. And the dragon still lives. But there came a day for you, Eustace, and I think for C.S. Lewis, and there can for you too, where God says to you, would you like my help? Would you like my help? And I'm not saying it's going to feel good, because you know what? Anytime you surrender utterly to God, sometimes there's some pain involved in that, isn't it? Because self does not want to die easily. Selfishness doesn't want to die. We don't even want to admit we're selfish. We don't even want to admit that we're me first. We don't want to say, that's painful. But God is able to take and peel off that which you are to your very core and change it so you're not that person any longer and make you back into what He wants you to be in the first place. Thank God. Isn't that good news? Man, that's good news. You see, good news, the gospel, the good news of Jesus is more than just God can forgive your sin. It's also that He can break its power in your life. It's the gospel, the good news is more than just try harder. It's that Jesus tried harder for you. And if you'll be crucified with Him and die to yourself and your own will and your own way, God can raise you up to new life and make you a different person when you couldn't do it for yourself. Have you died to your fleshly desires? If nothing else in the whole time comes out of this good, comes out of this fasting time, if nothing else comes out of it for you, and God doesn't, even if God didn't do great, powerful, amazing answers to prayer, if He did this in your life, this is a bigger miracle than anything else. Yes. That God could change the heart of a person, change it to where you're not that person anymore, you're a new creation in Christ Jesus. Old things have passed away and all things have become new. That's crazy. That's amazing. That's a miracle. So here's what I want to ask as you bow your heads with me for prayer. Have you died to your fleshly desires? Let's take just a moment here, because here's what I think is happening. I think the Holy Spirit's talking to you. And I think He's saying to you, oh, there are so many things I want to do to answer your prayers in this 40-day fasting. There are so many things I want to do. But there are some other hungers getting in the way. You see, maybe the first thing that God has to do is not, in answering your prayers, is not about them. Maybe it's about you. Maybe it's not about them getting their act together. Maybe it's about you drawing close to Him. Maybe it's not about everybody else seeing a miracle. Maybe it's He wants to do a miracle inside your heart.